Warning, this video contains graphic descriptions of a crime scene and adult dialogue that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So I know it's been a while since the last time I've spoken to you, but today I thought we'd sit down and talk about the Papin sisters case. Now I don't know about you, but me personally, I hadn't heard of this case before. I don't know how I hadn't heard of it before, because upon doing research, it's a wild case. There's a lot of information. It's pretty brutal. So yeah, I thought today we'd sit down, talk about that case together, and while I'm talking about the case, I'm going to do a bit of a makeup look just to keep myself busy. So the Papin sisters. There was 3 sisters altogether born in Le Mans, France. The oldest of the sisters being Amelia Papin. She was born in February of 1902. Although some reports that I looked on did say 1901, but the majority of the reports did say 1902, so we'll go with 1902. Next was Christine Papin. She was born March 8, 1905. And finally, Leah Papin was born September 15, 1911. Now, the Papin sisters were born to parents Gustave Papin and Clemence Papin, formerly Dier, I think is how you pronounce it. It might be wrong, I'm sorry if I butchered that name. But I think it's Dier, D-E-R-R-E. Now, Gustave and Clemence were said to be absolutely horrendous parents to all 3 of their kids. They didn't really seem to want kids, and with each kid that they had, they seemed to get more and more resentful towards their kids, which is really sad. But it was said that all 3 daughters witnessed some violence and also physical and emotional abuse too. It was also said that the girls were subjected to various forms of molestation in the household also. It's said that in 1912, Gustave Papin repeatedly raped his eldest daughter Amelia when she was only 9 or 10 years old. Now, upon finding this out, Clemence Papin, the girl's mother, was said to be very jealous. She was said to have thought that Amelia Papin had tried to seduce her father and believed that Amelia had asked her father to do all these unthinkable, horrendous things to her. And with finding this out, Clemence Papin, as I said, became very jealous, and she actually filed for divorce against Gustave Papin. Now, it really angers me reading this that instead of her thought process being that, oh my god, I have to save my daughter from going through these horrendous things by her own father, instead she was thinking you were asking for it, like basically that she was saying, oh, you tried to seduce your father. Like, that thought process, I don't know. I just don't know. Now, I know it was said that they didn't really want kids, or they didn't really have love for their kids, but no child or no human being deserves that. It's just really sad that Amelia had to go through that very traumatic experience over and over and over again at the hands of her own father, someone that's supposed to love her and protect her, and then her mother doesn't even care. She's jealous. She's jealous. Now, after it was found out that Gustave was raping Amelia, Clemence actually sent her off to an orphanage, and that orphanage was called Bon Pastor Catholic Orphanage. As I said, Clemence thought that her daughter asked for it. She was trying to seduce her father, and she just wanted her out of her sight. She wanted to put her into an orphanage until she was of legal working age, to then take her back out of the orphanage and put her to work. So it said when Christine was born, so the middle daughter, that Gustave and Clemence were absolutely disgusted. They didn't want one daughter, let alone 2 daughters. And it was said that once she was born, that Clemence just fell into this deep, dark pit of depression. She just didn't want anything to do with her daughters. And Gustave became very, very heavily reliant on alcohol. So with Clemence falling into a deep depression and Gustave struggling with alcoholism, they were unable to care for their newborn daughter. So they sent Christine to live with Gustave's sister. So her aunt. I couldn't find the name of this aunt or a picture, but it did say that it was Gustave's sister. It was said that at the age of 7, Christine was relocated to the same Catholic orphanage that her eldest sister Amelia was. So then fast forward to September 15th, 1911, Leah Papin was born, And even though it was said, I read in an article that Leah, when she was born, she was like the perfect child. She had such a nice mannerism. She wasn't any hassle, anything like that. But her parents still didn't want her, and they sent Leah off to live with her uncle. So Leah was said to have lived with her uncle until he passed away. Now, I couldn't find his name or a picture of him either. Maybe I wasn't looking on the right sites, but I know for a fact that she lived with him until he passed away. Once Leah's uncle passed away, she was then sent to the same Catholic orphanage that her two eldest sisters had been sent to, the Bonpastor Catholic Orphanage. So she was reunited with her two other sisters. Now, when I was reading up on this case, I found a quote that people basically used to describe Leah when she was born. Now, it was said that Leah grew up quiet, nervous, and altogether unintelligent with an obedient spirit. I actually found that quote quite sad. It's just, I know these girls done unimaginable things and things that they deserve to be punished for, but it's like from right off the bat, from the moment that they were born, there was just no love from their parents. They were just abandoned and just treated horribly from the people that you think that would care about them the most. But yeah, Leah's obedient behaviour would be later what got her into so much trouble with her obedient behaviour towards her older sister Christine. So Clemence wanted her daughters Leah and Christine to remain in the orphanage until they were 15, until they were of age to be able to be employed to work. I forgot to mention this earlier in the video, but because Clemence was so jealous of how much attention that Gustave was giving his daughters, and when obviously she found out that he was raping Amelia, their eldest daughter, she, as I said, filed for divorce, and they actually ended up ending their marriage and getting a divorce in 1903. Now, in 1918, the eldest daughter, Amelia, actually went into a convent to become a nun, and it's believed that she spent the remainder of her life in this convent and didn't have any contact with her family for the remainder of her life, and not even her two younger sisters, Christine or Leah. During Christine's time at the orphanage, she also received a calling to become a nun, but her mother Clemence basically said no, she wasn't having it, and she wanted Christine to turn 15 and leave the convent and go out to work. Now, Christine was described to be a good worker and a good cook, but she was also described to be a bit disobedient at times. So in 1926, Christine and Leah found live-in positions as maids in a beautiful townhouse for the Lancelin family. So Mr. Rene Lancelin, he was a retired solicitor, and his wife Leonie, and also their youngest daughter Genevieve, lived in this townhouse. They did have an older daughter, but she was already moved out of the house by this time and was married and had her own family. So Leah and Christine worked for the Lancelin family for 7 years, and it seemed to have started out okay. Depends on the reports you read, but it seemed to have started out okay, but then it was said that Mrs. Lancelin started to suffer from depression, and it was believed that she started to take that sort of anger and depression out on Leah and Christine. It was said that Mrs. Lancelin became physically abusive to both Leah and Christine, with some reports suggesting that she would actually bang the two girls' heads off a wall and also pinch them. So again, it depends on the reports that you read, because I was getting very different answers. So on some of the reports that I read, it said that when the girls were first employed by the Lancelin family, that they were treated very fairly. They were fed, they were clothed, they were housed in a beautiful 2-story townhouse, and also they were well paid. But other reports suggested that the girls were treated very poorly, that they were subjected to like 14-hour days with as little as 1 day off a week. And over time, cracks started to show in the girls' relationship with Mrs. Lancelin. It was said that in the whole 7 years that the girls worked for Mrs. Lancelin, she never directly spoke to the girls. If she wanted to talk to them, she'd write them a note, or she would go through Renee to communicate with the girls if she had something to say. But she'd communicate through Renee, and then he'd talk to the girls. It was said that like Mrs. Lancelin would go around with white gloves on and double check the girls' work, like check for dust with white gloves. So she'd run her finger along worktops or appliances that the girls had cleaned, and just to try, it just seemed like she was just didn't have much time for them and was just trying to catch them out, I suppose. But it was said that the girls were very good at their job. They were very thorough. They didn't leave like a job half done. So it was just all a bit unnecessary, it seemed, for Mrs. Lancelin. It was just like she just didn't want to like the girls. Now, I'm not saying for definite that she didn't like the girls, but just that's my personal opinion from reading all the reports. It just seemed that she didn't have much time for the girls. So the Lancelins' behaviour towards Leah and Christine was said to be very traumatising for the girls, especially for Christine, because the way the Lancelins were treating the girls was very similar to the way that their upbringing was and the way that their parents treated the girls. Just seemed to be that they didn't have much love for the girls, much time, much respect. Just didn't really seem to care about the girls, which is really, really sad. Christine was said to be so traumatised from her childhood abuse that she was described as being emotionally unpredictable. Leah, however, was not like her older sister. Leah was described to be very obedient and, quote, listened to her impulsive sister for cues on how to behave. So this brings us up to the evening of February 2nd, 1933. Renee, Genevieve and Leonie left their townhouse. So Renee went to go hang out with a friend while Leonie and Genevieve went on a girls' day out, a shopping trip. And then they were going to go back to Leonie's brother's house that evening for a meal. So Christine and Leah stayed back home in the Lanston family home, and they were just catching up on chores and running errands. And one of the errands was to pick up the iron from the repair shop. So the girls went to go pick up this iron from the repair shop, but what the girls didn't realise was that the iron was still faulty. So when they plugged it in, it caused a power cut in the whole house. So when the power cut happened, the girls didn't really see any great hurry in fixing it because the Lanston family wasn't supposed to be home. As I said, they were gone on a shopping trip. Renee had went to his friends to hang out, and then they were all going to go back to Leonie's brother's house for a meal that evening. So the girls sort of pushed it off till the next morning to fix the power cut. So what the girls didn't realise was that Genevieve and Leonie was going to make a stop off at home before they went to Leonie's brother's house for dinner. So when Leonie and Genevieve pulled up to the house, they saw that all the lights were off in the house. So they both decided to go in to the home, and it was said instead of Leonie reacting calmly, like, you know, it can happen, power cut can happen, faulty iron, she was said to have just exploded into a fit of rage and began to attack the girls. So this was said to be the last straw for Christine. She just had enough of it. She had enough of the abuse over the years, and this was just the final straw. So it was said that she retaliated and she picked up a hard jug and smashed Leonie over the head with the jug. So understandably, Genevieve tried to help her mum when she saw Christine attacking her. So she went to go help her mum, but it was said that Christine turned around and gouged out Genevieve's eyes. So Leah was said to have just been standing there watching Christine performed these horrendous acts on both Leonie and Genevieve, and it was said that she was sort of standing there waiting for instructions from her older sister, and that's when Christine told her to perform the same acts on Leonie. So Leah, being as obedient as ever and listening to her older sister, she was said to have turned around and proceeded to gouge out Leonie's eyes also. So once Leah and Christine gouged out Leonie and Genevieve's eyes, it said that Christine then proceeded to go into the kitchen to look for further weapons. So Christine and Leah proceeded to beat Leonie and Genevieve with hammers, kitchen knives and a lot of other kitchenware until sadly both Leonie and Genevieve had passed away. So I'm just going to read out a quote from what Christine said about that night. So she said, "Seeing that Mrs. Lancelin," I assume she means Genevieve, the daughter, was going to throw herself on me, I jumped on her face and I tore her eyes off with my fingers. During this time, my sister Leah jumped on Mrs. Lancelin and also tore off her eyes. When we did that, they laid down or squatted on the spot. Then I rushed down to the kitchen and went to get a hammer and a kitchen knife. But the violence didn't stop there. It was said that even though Leonie and Genevieve had passed away, that Leah and Christine still began to stab them in the face beyond the point of recognition. This attack was said to have lasted for about 2 hours. The girls just had no mercy. After the Papin sisters had finished their attack on Leonie and Genevieve, they were said to have went upstairs to their room and stripped down naked and got into bed together. Now, some people with good reason believed that the sisters sort of had some sort of sexual relationship together. Now, neither Leah or Christine ever denied or confirmed these rumours. So Mr. Lancelin became a bit concerned when his wife and daughter didn't show up to his wife's brother's house for the meal. So he decided to drive back home to see if maybe they'd went home for some reason, if they forgot something. So he just swung back by the house. So Mr. Lancelin actually tried to go into his home, but he realised that the door had been locked from the inside. So he ended up having to go down to the police station and explain everything to the police that was what was going on, and he had to get the help from the police to break into his own home. I think the police must have kicked in the door, or I'm not quite sure, but he needed the police to help him get into his home. Once the door was open and they proceeded to go inside, that's when they made the grim discovery that Leonie and Genevieve had sadly passed away. So thinking the worst, Mr. Rene Lancelin thought about the Papin sisters. He thought, if Leonie and Genevieve, my wife and daughter, are dead, maybe somebody broke into the home. So his initial reaction was go up and check on them, expecting the worst. But once he walked into the Papin sisters' room, Renee found both Leah and Christine lying in bed together, covered in blood. Now, some reports that I read, they'd say that the sisters cleaned themselves off before getting in bed together, but others said that they were discovered in bed together, naked, while covered in blood. So Leah and Christine didn't try to hide the crimes that they had performed. They were said to have admitted straight away to the crimes that they did. They didn't try to cover it up, and it was also said that they didn't show any bit of remorse. They didn't care. When the sisters were arrested, they were placed in separate prisons. Now, this was said to have caused distress to the sisters, especially Christine, to the point that she had to be granted permission to go see her younger sister. Apparently, when Christine finally was able to see her younger sister Leah, it was reported that she threw herself into Leah's arms, and some say that the conversation that the two had together when they were reunited was sexual. The sisters just stuck together the whole way through life. They were each other's best friends. They didn't want anybody else. They didn't need anybody else but each other. So it was very hard for the two sisters to be away from each other. So it really started to affect Christine especially. A few months go by and it was said that Christine suffered a rage or a fit of insanity, and she tried to gouge out her own eyes. So on the night of the murders, Christine said that she suffered a similar episode to the episode that she suffered in prison when she tried to gouge out her own eyes. She said that that was a similar sort of episode that she experienced that night. They had to put Christine into a straitjacket. So some people believe that the sisters suffered from a psychotic disorder. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, so I'm just going to pop it up on screen what that disorder was. Now, I don't think the sisters were ever diagnosed with this disorder. I could be wrong, but I think that people just thought that they were showing signs and symptoms of this disorder, so they thought that that's what they had. Not that far-fetched to think that the sisters might have suffered a mental illness. As I said earlier on, their mother suffered very badly with depression, so it kind of ran in the family. Even though some people did think that the girls had a psychotic disorder, others believed that the horrendous acts against Leonie and Genevieve were nothing more than just a rebellious act against the family because of the cold, callous, detached way that they were treated in the household. Some people even went as far as to idolize Leah and Christine for the horrendous crimes that they committed, as a way of making an example of their employer for the way that they were treated by them, how cruel that they treated them. Like, they had fans. So the trial for the Papin sisters began in September of 1933, and it was concluded that Christine was the mastermind behind the crime, and it was said that it was nothing more than just a petty feud between Christine and Mrs. Lancelin. So the history of mental illness in the family and just the crappy upbringing that the girls had, just with the abuse from their mother, their father, it was all taken into consideration, but the girls were still sentenced. With Christine considered to be the mastermind behind the crimes, she was actually sentenced to death, but then it was later changed to life in prison. Leah was actually given a shorter sentence than Christine for her involvement in the murder. Leah was actually only sentenced to 10 years in prison. The courts apparently said that Leah was so consumed by her sister Christine to the point that she had no personality of her own, and she was just a mere extension of Christine's personality. After Christine's sentence to death was changed to life in prison, Christine didn't take to this very well. She wasn't coping very well not seeing her sister, and eventually she just refused to eat. She would burst out into these fits of rage and insanity. She just was not coping without her sister. It was also said that Christine became very, very depressed during this time. So after continuously starving herself, Christine slowly started to waste away. Her body just started to shut down. She just was not doing well. She was not in a good place. Eventually, Christine ended up passing away from a disorder called cachexia. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm going to pop it up on screen here. I'm so sorry that I'm butchering these names. I'm very sorry. And this disorder causes extreme weight loss and muscle wasting, and also includes loss of body fat. So while I was doing some research on this case, I actually saw on one of the articles, now I don't know if it's true or not, but I saw that apparently when Christine and Leah's mum and dad, Gustav and Clemens, split up, divorced, that Leah and Christine spent some time in a mental institution. As I said, I'm not sure how true that is, but I saw it, so I just thought I'd include it. Now, I also read on a report that people said while the girls were quiet and sort of stuck to themselves and were always sort of just together, that some people actually believe that the girls may have even been telepathic because of how silent they were and how much they used to just stick to each other, and it was like they could almost communicate with each other by just looking at each other without even saying a word. So fast forward to 1941, and Leah Papin was actually released from prison on the grounds of good behaviour after serving just 8 years of her 10-year sentence. So Leah being released from prison in 1941 on good behaviour, she actually moved back in with her mum Clemence until her mum passed away on the 10th of January 1957. I tried to look it up and I couldn't find out when Gustav, Christine and Leah's father passed away, or the elder sister. I might just have missed it, but I couldn't see it when I looked it up. But I will insert a picture of their death notices that I did find. So it's believed that Leah got a job as a hotel maid in Nantes using a fake ID. And it's also believed that this is the town where Leah and her mum actually lived together until Leah's mum, Clemence, passed away. It was said that Leah actually done quite well. It's almost like she bloomed herself. She got her own personality about herself when her sister Christine passed away. It's sort of sad when you think about it. Christine couldn't live without Leah, but Leah seemed to come out of her shell and began to actually blossom once her sister had passed away. Leah Papin passed away in 1982. Although this was questioned in 2002 when a documentary filmmaker called Claude Ventura claimed that she was alive and shown in the film In Search of the Papin sisters, directed by Ventura himself. In the film, she's shown as being partly paralysed and unable to speak, and this is because of a stroke that she had shortly before starting to film. So Leah is then said to have passed away on July 24th, 2001. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the place where she passed away because I'm going to absolutely butcher it. So again, I'll pop it up on screen here. The girls without doubt had such a terrible upbringing at the hands of their mother and father. They should be ashamed of themselves, really, the way they treated their 3 daughters. The years and years of abuse and just being belittled and everything like that. I can only imagine how that would make somebody feel. But I still don't think it's a reason to kill or murder anybody. I do believe that Leah and Christine needed more people around them to help them, potentially with their mental health, to try get it under control. But it's awful. I feel bad for the upbringing that they had, but I also can't justify that with the hideous crimes that they committed. But at the end of the day, the girls did commit terrible murders and they did deserve to be sentenced and they did deserve to be punished. And yeah, it's a terrible case. I just want to say rest in peace to Genevieve and Leonie Lancelin. Their lives were cut way too short at the hands of Christine and Leah, and it's just awful. But that's it for me today, guys. I just want to thank you so much if you stuck around to the end of this video. Your support means absolutely everything to me. I'm going to try to be uploading as regular as possible now. I really miss doing these videos, so I'm going to get right back into doing these videos. So if you have any cases that you want me to cover next, please let me know down in the comment section below. I would really appreciate your suggestions. And if you like the video, guys, please like, comment and subscribe. It really helps me out. And I'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now, guys.